The Senate chamber was suffocating that morning. Every seat filled, every camera angle covered, every reporter ready. This wasn't supposed to be memorable. Immigration policy hearings rarely were, but Ilhan Omar had other plans. She leaned into her microphone, eyes locked on the man in the presiding chair. Her voice cut through the murmur like a blade. "Mr. Vice President, your entire story is a lie." The room went silent. Vice President J.D. Vance didn't move. He sat perfectly still, legal pad in front of him, pen poised but motionless. His face revealed nothing. No anger, no surprise, nothing. He looked like a man who'd been expecting this. Because he had been. Omar lifted a worn paperback, holding it up so the cameras could see the cover. Hillbilly Elegy. She spat the title like it tasted rotten. More like hillbilly fantasy. She tossed the book onto the witness table. It landed with a slap that echoed in the silent chamber. "You exploited your family's suffering for a book deal. You made millions off your mother's addiction. And then you betrayed everything you claimed to believe in." Vance made a small note on his pad, still no reaction. He didn't interrupt, he didn't defend himself, he just listened. Omar was just getting started. "You talk about the American dream, Mr. Vice President, but you married into money. You talk about pulling yourself up by your bootstraps, but Yale Law School gave you a golden ticket to the elite. You talk about family values, but you wrote a book trashing your own mother for the whole world to read." She paused, letting each accusation settle over the room like dust. Democratic senators nodded. Some smiled. This was what they'd come for. The progressive warrior taking down the conservative vice president. The viral moment that would dominate the news cycle for weeks. And now you sit there as vice president, serving a man you once called America's Hitler. You called him reprehensible. You said you might vote for Hillary Clinton rather than support him. And now you're his loyal servant. Omar spread her hands, a theatrical gesture of disbelief. "Where are your principles, Mr. Vance? Where is your integrity? Where is the man who supposedly came from nothing and achieved everything through hard work and honesty?" She leaned back in her chair, satisfaction radiating from her like heat. "I'll tell you where he is. He never existed. Your story is a fabrication. A carefully constructed myth designed to make you relatable to working people while you serve the billionaire class." The chamber buzzed with energy. Cameras zoomed in on Omar, capturing her righteous indignation. This was the confrontation everyone had been waiting for, the moment that would define both of their careers. Vance set down his pen. For the first time since she'd started speaking, he looked directly at her. His eyes were calm, almost gentle. There was no anger in them, no defensiveness, just a quiet, patient attention. "Are you finished, Representative Omar?" His voice was soft, almost kind, like he was asking if she needed more time, more space, more rope. Omar seemed surprised. She'd expected him to interrupt, to fight back, to give her more ammunition. Instead, he'd simply listened to her destroy him for 22 minutes without saying a word. "I have more to say about your—" "I'm sure you do." Vance reached beside his chair and picked up a folder, a thick folder. "But I have a few questions for you first, if you don't mind." Omar glanced at the committee chairman, then back at Vance. "This hearing is about immigration policy, not. You've spent the last 22 minutes attacking my character, my family, and my life story. I think I'm entitled to a response." He opened the folder slowly, deliberately. The sound of papers rustling filled the chamber. Everyone leaned forward. "Let's talk about the American dream, Representative Omar. Let's talk about authenticity, about integrity, about who really exploits their story." He looked up, his eyes met hers. "Let's talk about you." What Omar didn't know, what she couldn't have known, was that this moment had been 3 months in the making. 3 months earlier, when the hearing was first scheduled, Vance's chief of staff had received an intelligence briefing. A staffer on the Democratic side, uncomfortable with the planned ambush, had leaked the strategy. They knew Omar was coming. They knew what she would say. They knew every attack, every accusation, every carefully rehearsed line. And Vance had made a decision. Let her attack, he'd told his team in a closed-door meeting. Let her say everything she wants to say. Don't interrupt. Don't defend. Just let her talk. His communications director had been horrified. "Sir, she's going to eviscerate you on national television. We need to push back. We need to." "No," Vance's voice had been firm. "We need to let her build her entire argument, because when she's done, I'm going to ask her some questions, and every single attack she makes on me is going to become a weapon against her." He'd pulled out a folder, a thick folder, the result of 3 months of careful, meticulous research. "She's going to attack my family history. Mine is documented in a best-selling book that's been fact-checked for years. Hers involves possible immigration fraud and a marriage to someone who may be her brother." He'd flipped a page. "She's going to attack my finances. I wrote a book and earned my money legally. She funneled $3 million to her boyfriend's company." Another page. "She's going to attack my loyalty. I changed my mind about a politician publicly. She swore an oath to America and then promised Somalia she would serve them from inside the system." Vance had closed the folder and looked at his staff. "Every attack she makes on me, she's making on herself. She just doesn't know it yet." For 3 months his staff had worked, documents gathered, sources verified, visual aids prepared. They'd obtained records from Minnesota courts, FEC filings, social media archives, translated videos. They'd interviewed former staffers willing to talk. They'd traced financial transactions through public records. They'd built an airtight case. By the morning of the hearing, Vance had 6 folders arranged in precise order on his desk. Marriage, taxes, campaign finance, Somalia, anti-Semitism. The pattern. He knew exactly what Omar would say, and he knew exactly how he would respond. As Omar had walked confidently into the Senate chamber that morning, flanked by her staff, she'd been mentally rehearsing her lines, already imagining the headlines. "Omar destroys Vance. Hillbilly vice president exposed as fraud. Progressive warrior takes down conservative icon." She hadn't even glanced at Vance as she took her seat at the witness table. She had no idea she was walking into a trap. Now, 22 minutes later, Omar sat across from Vance as he opened his first folder. Something in his demeanor had shifted. The passive listener was gone. In his place was something sharper, more focused, more dangerous. "Representative Omar," Vance began, his voice still calm but with an edge now. "You've made some serious accusations about my character, about my family, about my integrity, and I appreciate you laying them all out so clearly. It makes what I'm about to do much easier." He pulled out a document, a marriage certificate. "You accused me of having a fake poverty story, of manufacturing hardship for profit. So let's talk about fake stories, Representative. Let's talk about manufactured narratives." He looked at the document, then at her. "Let's talk about your marriages." Omar's expression flickered, just for a moment, a tiny crack in the confident facade. Then she recovered. "My personal life is not. You just spent 20 minutes attacking my personal life, Representative. My family, my mother, my marriage. You opened this door. Now we're going to walk through it together." Vance held up the marriage certificate. "According to Minnesota state records, in 2009, you legally married a man named Ahmed Nursaid Elmi. Is that correct?" Omar's jaw tightened. "Yes." "And you separated from him in 2011 but didn't officially divorce until 2017, 6 years later. Is that also correct? The divorce process was complicated by. Yes or no, Representative? Were you legally married to Ahmed Elmi from 2009 to 2017? A pause. The chamber held its breath. "Yes." "Thank you," Vance made a note. "Now, during that time, specifically in June 2012, you had a third child. Is that correct?" Omar said nothing. "Representative Omar, did you have a child in June 2012? "Yes." "And the father of that child was Ahmed Hiasi, not Ahmed Elmi, your legal husband. Is that correct?" Silence. Omar stared at the table in front of her. "For the record, I'll note that Representative Omar is declining to answer. But the birth certificate is a public record. The father listed is Ahmed Hiasi." Vance pulled out another document. "So you were having Ahmed Hiasi's baby while legally married to Ahmed Elmi. That's interesting. But here's what's more interesting." He spread papers across his desk. Tax returns, forms with official government seals. In 2014 and 2015, you filed federal tax returns, joint returns, and you filed them with Ahmed Hiasi. Not with Ahmed Elmi, your legal husband, but with Ahmed Hiasi. He looked up. Representative Omar, you can only file joint tax returns with someone you're legally married to. That's federal law. But you weren't legally married to Ahmed Hiasi. You were legally married to Ahmed Elmi. Vance leaned forward. So either you committed tax fraud by filing false joint returns, or you were somehow married to both men at the same time, which would be bigamy. Which was it? Omar's voice was tight, controlled. On advice of counsel, I declined to discuss my tax filings. You're invoking the Fifth Amendment. Noted. Vance made another mark on his legal pad. The chamber was completely silent now. Every senator, every reporter, every person in the gallery was locked on the exchange. But we're not done yet. He pulled out photographs. Large photographs, enlarged and mounted on foam board. An aide appeared and set them up on easels where everyone could see. These are photographs from your Instagram account, dated June 2015. That's 4 years after you claim you separated from Ahmed Elmi and lost contact with him. He pointed to the first image, a couple in front of Big Ben, London. The woman was clearly Ilhan Omar. The man beside her, arm around her shoulders, smiling at the camera. This appears to be you in London. And this man standing next to you, smiling, arm around you, has been identified as Ahmed Elmi, your husband, the one you supposedly hadn't contacted since 2011. He pulled out another document, a divorce filing, official court documents with seals and signatures. When you filed for divorce in 2017, you submitted a sworn statement to the Minnesota court. You stated under oath that you had not had any contact with Ahmed Elmi since June 2011, that you didn't know where he was. Vance held up the Instagram photo alongside the divorce filing, side by side. The contrast was damning. These photos prove that statement was false. You were with him in London in 2015. You posted evidence of it on social media, and then you told a court under oath that you had no contact with him. He set down the documents. That's called perjury, representative. It's a felony. Omar's lawyer was whispering urgently in her ear. Her face had gone pale. The confident warrior from 20 minutes ago was gone. In her place was someone who looked cornered. Vance picked up another document. He held it for a moment, letting the tension build. The entire chamber was silent, waiting. But here's the question everyone wants answered, representative. The question you've refused to address for years. He paused, the silence stretched. Is Ahmed Nursaid Elmi your brother? The chamber erupted. Senators shouted. The gallery burst into noise. Reporters typed furiously. Chairman Grassley's gavel cracked against wood again and again, trying to restore order. Order, this chamber will come to order. It took nearly 2 minutes for the chaos to subside. When it finally did, Omar was leaning into her microphone, her voice shaking with barely controlled anger. That question is disgusting. It is based on racist conspiracy theories promoted by right-wing hate sites. I will not dignify it with a response. Vance waited patiently for her to finish. He didn't react to her anger. He didn't get defensive. He just waited. I understand you find the question offensive, representative, but it's based on public records, not conspiracy theories. Let me explain why people have asked it. He laid out documents as he spoke. University records, emergency contact forms, immigration applications. Ahmed Elmi's birth date, as listed on your marriage certificate, would make him younger than you. But you've stated publicly that you are the youngest of 7 children. If he's not your sibling, why would he be younger than the youngest child? He pulled out another document. Both of you attended North Dakota State University at the same time. Both lived in the same cities. And according to university records I've obtained, when Ahmed Elmi filled out his emergency contact form in 2009, he listed you, Ilhan Omar, as his sister. He held up the document, official university letterhead. The handwriting was clear. This is a form from North Dakota State's registrar office. Ahmed Elmi's handwriting, your name, relationship, sister. Omar's face had gone from pale to ashen. I've also obtained records from UK immigration authorities. When Ahmed Elmi applied for a student visa to enter the United Kingdom, he listed a home address in Somalia. That address matches the address your family has used in official documents. Vance spread more papers across his desk. Addresses, lease agreements, utility bills. At one point, you, Ahmed Elmi and Ahmed Hiasi were all registered at the same address in Minneapolis. The same apartment, 3 adults, your legal husband, your previous husband, and you, living together. He looked up. Most people don't live with their husband and their ex-husband at the same time, Representative, unless the husband isn't really a husband at all, unless he's a family member who needed immigration documents, unless the marriage was fraud. Omar found her voice. This is a coordinated smear campaign. Is it? Vance's voice was mild. It's public records, Representative, marriage certificates, tax filings, university documents, your own social media posts. Are all of those part of a smear campaign? He gathered the marriage documents into a neat pile. You attacked me for having a fake story, but my story is in a book that's been fact-checked by journalists for nearly a decade. Your story involves possible immigration fraud, definite perjury, and documented tax violations. He set the folder aside and reached for another. You attacked me for exploiting my family, but I wrote honestly about my family's struggles. You may have married your brother to help him get a green card. Another folder. You mocked my marriage as marrying up, but I have one wife. You apparently had 2 husbands at the same time, one legal, one religious, and possibly a brother mixed in there somewhere. He opened the new folder. This one was even thicker. Now let's talk about money, since you accused me of selling out to the rich. Vance pulled out a thick stack of documents bound with a clip. Federal Election Commission reports. Thousands of pages of financial disclosures. Representative Omar, your current husband, is Tim Minot. Before you married him, he ran a political consulting firm called the E Street Group. Is that correct? Omar's voice was strained. My husband's business is not relevant to. You spent 20 minutes attacking my wife's family background. I think your husband's business is fair game. He didn't wait for a response. According to Federal Election Commission records, from 2018 through 2020, your campaign paid the E Street Group approximately $2.9 million. He let the number settle. $2.9 million. For perspective, that was 78% of the E Street Group's total revenue during that period. Nearly 4 out of every $5 Tim Minot's company earned came from your campaign. He pulled out another document. And those payments, that $2.9 million, represented 56% of your campaign's total expenditures. More than half of every dollar donated to your campaign went to your boyfriend's company. Omar attempted to interrupt. The services were legitimate. I didn't ask if they were legitimate. I asked if you were sleeping with the man whose company received $2.9 million from your campaign. He pulled out a divorce filing. Bate Minot's divorce complaint against Tim Minot. This is from Bate Minot, Tim Minot's wife at the time. In her divorce complaint, she stated, and I quote, "The parties physically separated on or about April 7, 2019, when defendant told plaintiff that he was romantically involved with and in love with another woman, Ilhan Omar." Vance looked up. April 2019. Tim Minot confessed to his wife that he was having an affair with you. Now let's look at what happened to the money after that. He spread FEC documents across his desk, highlighted sections, payment schedules, invoices. Before April 2019, your campaign was already paying Tim Minot's firm substantial amounts. But after the affair was exposed, the payments increased dramatically. In the 8 months from May to December 2019, your campaign paid his firm over $1 million. He traced the numbers with his finger. The payments went up after you were caught, Representative. You rewarded your boyfriend for the affair with your donor's money. Omar's voice rose. Those payments were for legitimate campaign services. Were they? Vance pulled out more documents. Internal billing records, travel receipts, hotel confirmations. I have internal billing records from the E Street Group. obtained from a former employee who was troubled by what she saw. These show invoices for campaign consulting services on dates when, according to travel records, you and Mr. Minot were together in locations that had nothing to do with campaign work. He held up the papers. A hotel in the Caribbean, a resort in California, a weekend in New York City. He set down the invoices. Your campaign was billed for services that were actually personal travel with your boyfriend. Your donors thought they were funding your re-election. They were funding your affair. Omar turned to the chairman. This is completely improper. You attacked my integrity, Representative. You questioned my finances. You mocked how I made my money. I wrote a book. You embezzled from your campaign. Which one of us sold out? Vance wasn't finished. And then there's Rose Lake Capital, your husband's new venture capital firm. After all the scrutiny on the E Street Group, Mr. Minot shut it down and started this new company. He pulled out court documents, financial filings, bank statements. According to filings in a South Dakota lawsuit, Rose Lake Capital had $42 in its bank account in early 2024. $42. He pulled out Omar's Congressional Financial Disclosure, official House of Representatives documents. But according to your own financial disclosure, filed with the House of Representatives under penalty of perjury, by the end of 2024, Rose Lake Capital was worth between $5 million and $25 million. He looked up. From $42 to potentially $25 million in less than a year. That's an extraordinary rate of return. Representative, can you explain it? Omar said nothing. I've done some research on Rose Lake Capital. Their website says they have extensive international ties and expertise in diplomacy, legislation, and politics. But they don't identify any clients. They don't disclose any investments. The money just appeared. Vance pulled out more documents, wire transfer records, meeting logs, photographs. I've obtained records showing wire transfers to Rose Lake Capital from shell companies registered in Dubai and Mogadishu. I have photographs of Tim Minot meeting with Qatari businessmen in Washington, D.C. meetings that coincided with your votes on the House Foreign Affairs Committee regarding Middle East policy. He spread the evidence across his desk. You sit on the Foreign Affairs Committee, Representative. You have access to classified information about sensitive diplomatic matters, and your husband runs a company with mysterious international ties that won't disclose its clients. A company that went from $42 to millions with no public explanation. Vance gathered the financial documents. You accused me of selling out to the rich, but I earned my money by writing a book about my life. What did you sell to earn yours? He set aside the folder and reached for the next one. Now let's talk about loyalty, since you accused me of betraying my origins. The chamber had grown increasingly tense as Vance methodically dismantled Omar's credibility. Democratic senators sat in uncomfortable silence. Republican senators watched with barely concealed satisfaction. The media gallery had abandoned any pretense of neutrality. This was the story. Vance opened his next folder with deliberate calm. Representative Omar, on January 27, 2024, you gave a speech at the Hyatt Regency Hotel in Minneapolis. The speech was in Somali. Were you there? Omar's posture stiffened. I attend many events in my district. That's not what I asked. Were you at the Hyatt Regency on January 27th, giving a speech in Somali? A pause, yes. Good. Now, there's been some dispute about the translation of that speech. Your office claimed the translations circulating online were inaccurate, so I did what any thorough person would do. Vance pulled out a document. I hired 3 independent translators, native Somali speakers, certified court interpreters with no political affiliation. They reviewed the video independently, and while there were minor differences in word choice, they all agreed on the substance of what you said. He nodded to an aide. A screen activated behind him. Video began to play, Omar speaking in Somali with English subtitles at the bottom. The chamber watched as Omar told her audience, "We are Somalis first. We are Muslims. We are people who know our blood, our heritage, our obligations to each other. The video continued. Omar discussed Somalia's territorial disputes with Ethiopia and neighboring regions. Then came the key passage. As long as I am in the United States Congress, Somalia will never be alone. We will make sure that America does not support anyone who threatens our homeland. Sleep in comfort, my brothers and sisters, knowing that I am there, inside the American government, protecting the interests of Somalia. Vance paused the video. Did you say those words, Representative Omar? Omar's voice was tight. The context of that speech. I'm not asking about context. I'm asking if you said those words. Inside the American government protecting the interests of Somalia. Did you say that? Silence. I have 3 certified translations that all agree. Did you say it? I was expressing solidarity with my community. Did you say it, yes or no? A long pause. The translation captures the general meaning, but... Thank you. Vance pulled out another document. Let me read you something, Representative. This is the oath you took when you became a United States citizen. He read slowly, deliberately. I hereby declare on oath that I absolutely and entirely renounce and abjure all allegiance and fidelity to any foreign prince, potentate, state, or sovereignty of whom or which I have heretofore been a subject or citizen. He looked up. You swore to renounce all allegiance to foreign states. You swore that under oath. And then you stood before a Somali audience and promised to protect Somalia's interests from inside the American government. He set down the oath. When you were sworn into Congress, you took another oath. You swore to support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic. You swore to bear true faith and allegiance to the Constitution. Vance's voice hardened. Not to Somalia, not to any foreign country, to the United States, to the Constitution. He reached for another document. But there's more from that event. My investigators obtained additional footage that wasn't widely circulated. A second video began to play. Same event, different portion of the speech. Omar's voice translated. America is where we work, where we earn money, where we build influence. But Somalia is where our hearts belong. Somalia is home. And we must use every tool we have, including our positions in American government, to benefit our true homeland. The video continued. The Americans don't understand us. They think we become American when we take their citizenship, but we know the truth. We are Somali forever, and we are inside their system now, inside their government, inside their institutions. We will use that position for Somalia. Vance stopped the video. The chamber was silent. The words hung in the air like accusations. America is where we work. Somalia is home. We are inside their system. We will use that position for Somalia. He looked directly at Omar. You accused me of being a shapeshifter because I changed my opinion about a politician. But I never pretended to be loyal to America while secretly serving another country. I never swore an oath I didn't intend to keep. He pulled out more documents. I've also obtained communications between your office and Somali government officials, requests for classified briefings to be shared, attempts to influence American foreign policy to benefit Somalia at the expense of U.S. interests, meetings with representatives of the Somali government that weren't disclosed on your official calendar. He spread the papers across his desk. You sit on the House Foreign Affairs Committee. You have access to sensitive information about American diplomatic strategy, and you've been using that position, by your own admission, to benefit a foreign country. Vance gathered the documents. You accused me of betraying my origins because I moved away from Appalachia and became successful. But I never swore an oath to Appalachia. I never promised to serve Appalachia from inside the government. I'm allowed to leave my hometown and pursue opportunities elsewhere. He leaned forward. You, on the other hand, swore an oath to America. You took that oath when you became a citizen. You took it again when you entered Congress. And you violated both oaths when you promised Somalia you would serve their interests from inside our government. His voice cut through the silence. That's not changing your mind about a politician, Representative. That's betraying your country. Which one of us is the real shapeshifter? Vance pulled out one more document from the Somalia folder. But there's something else I want to address because you mentioned it in your attack on me. You talked about betraying your origins. You implied that I abandoned Appalachia, that I forgot where I came from. He held up the document. This is a list of my activities in Ohio and Appalachian communities since I became successful. Donations to addiction treatment centers. Scholarships I've funded for first-generation college students. Investments in businesses in my hometown. Time I've spent mentoring young people from backgrounds like mine. He set it down. I didn't abandon Appalachia, Representative. I've spent years trying to help the community I came from. I've put my money and my time into making things better for people still struggling there. Vance's voice hardened. But you, what have you done for the Somali community here in America? Have you helped them integrate? Have you encouraged them to embrace American values while honoring their heritage? Have you been a bridge between cultures? He shook his head. No, you've told them to stay separate. You've told them that America is where we work, but Somalia is home. You've encouraged division, not unity. You've taught them that American citizenship is a tool to be used, not a commitment to be honored. He pulled out more documents, transcripts of speeches, videos from community events. I've obtained records of your speeches to Somali community groups over the years. The pattern is consistent. In English to American audiences, you talk about the American dream, about integration, about being proud Americans. But in Somali to Somali audiences, the message is different. He read from transcripts. We must maintain our Somali identity. America is useful, but it is not our true home. Our children must not forget that they are Somali first. We are building power in America to help Somalia. Vance looked up. You speak out of both sides of your mouth, Representative. One message for Americans, another for Somalis. That's not bridging cultures. That's exploiting them. That's using your position in both communities for your own benefit while serving neither honestly. He gathered all the Somalia documents. You accused me of betraying my origins, but I've spent years trying to help the community I came from while also building a life in the broader American society. That's not betrayal. That's success. That's exactly what the American dream is supposed to look like. He set the folder aside. You, on the other hand, have maintained a secret loyalty to a foreign country while pretending to serve America. You've encouraged your community to stay separate rather than integrate. You've used your position in Congress to benefit Somalia rather than your constituents in Minnesota. His voice was cold now. That's the real betrayal, Representative. Not moving away from your hometown to pursue opportunities, swearing an oath to one country while serving another. He set the folder aside. Now let's talk about character, since you attacked mine so thoroughly. Vance opened his next folder, thinner than the others but no less damaging. Representative Omar, you attacked my integrity, my principles, my character. So let's examine yours. He pulled out printed screenshots, tweets blown up to readable size. In 2012, before you entered politics, you posted this on Twitter. Israel has hypnotized the world. May Allah awaken the people and help them see the evil doings of Israel. He held up the screenshot. Hypnotize the world. That's language that's been used to persecute Jews for centuries. The idea that Jews use mystical powers to deceive and control non-Jews. It's a classic anti-Semitic trope. He moved to the next screenshot. February 2019. You're now in Congress. There's a discussion about AIPAC and you tweet, "It's all about the Benjamins, baby." You were saying that support for Israel is bought with Jewish money. That's another anti-Semitic trope. The idea that Jews use money to control governments and politicians. He moved to the third screenshot. March 2019. You said this at a town hall. I want to talk about the political influence in this country that says it is okay to push for allegiance to a foreign country. You were questioning the loyalty of American Jews, suggesting they have allegiance to a foreign country. That's the dual loyalty trope. Another classic anti-Semitic accusation that's been used to persecute Jews throughout history. Vance set down the screenshots. You apologized 3 times, Representative. 3 separate apologies for 3 separate anti-Semitic statements. Each time you said you were learning. You said you didn't realize these were harmful tropes. He pulled out another document, but your own party didn't buy it. Let me read from the joint statement issued by Speaker Pelosi, Majority Leader Hoyer, and other Democratic leaders after your comments. He read aloud, "Anti-Semitism must be called out, confronted, and condemned whenever it is encountered, without exception." He looked up. Your own party condemned you, Representative, not Republicans, Democrats. Your own colleagues said you were spreading anti-Semitism. Vance gathered the anti-Semitism evidence. You attacked my character. You questioned my principles. But I've never spread hatred against any ethnic group. I've never had to apologize 3 times for bigotry. I've never been condemned by my own party for promoting harmful stereotypes. He reached for another document. And then there's September 11th. The chamber grew even quieter, if that was possible. In March 2019, you gave a speech at a CAIR event in Los Angeles, and you described the worst terrorist attack in American history, the murder of nearly 3,000 Americans, with these words: "Some people did something." Vance let the phrase hang in the air. Some people did something. That's how you described September 11th. 19 terrorists hijacking 4 planes, flying them into buildings, murdering nearly 3,000 innocent people. And you called it "some people did something." He pulled out another document. Do you know who Nicholas Harrows Jr. is, Representative? Omar said nothing. His mother, Frances Harrows, was murdered in the World Trade Center. She was 76 years old. On September 11, 2019, Nicholas Harrows stood at Ground Zero wearing a T-shirt with your words on it. "Some people did something." Vance read from the transcript. He said, "Madam, objectively speaking, we know who and what was done. There is no uncertainty about that. Why your confusion? On that day, 19 Islamic terrorists, members of Al-Qaeda, killed over 3,000 people and caused billions of dollars in economic damage. Is that clear?" He looked up. A grieving son asked you publicly at Ground Zero to acknowledge what happened to his mother, to clearly state who attacked America and what they did. And you never apologized to him. You never apologized to any of the 9/11 families. Instead, you claimed you were the victim. You said the criticism was incitement against you. Vance shook his head. You attacked me for trashing my mother in my book. But I wrote honestly about her struggles with addiction because I thought it might help other families going through the same thing. I didn't exploit her. I tried to understand her, to humanize her, to show that addiction doesn't define a person's worth. He set down the 9/11 documents. You minimized the murder of 3,000 Americans and then made yourself the victim when people called you out. His voice was hard now. That's your character, Representative. Anti-Semitic tropes, minimizing terrorism, playing the victim when confronted. And you came here today to lecture me about integrity. Vance stood from the presiding chair. He walked slowly to the front of the dais, moving deliberately, letting the tension build. The entire chamber watched him. No one moved. He stopped at the center of the chamber, facing Omar directly. "Representative Omar, you came here today to destroy me, to expose me as a fraud, to show the world that my story, the hillbilly who made it out, who wrote a book, who eventually became vice president, was a lie." He paused. "You called my poverty story fake. You said I manufactured my hardship. You accused me of exploiting my family's suffering for profit." Another pause. "So let's compare our stories, Representative, side by side, honestly." He raised one hand. "My story: I grew up in genuine poverty in Middletown, Ohio. My mother was addicted to drugs. That's documented. That's real. That's not manufactured. My grandmother raised me. I joined the Marines. I went to Ohio State on the GI Bill. I got into Yale Law School through hard work and good grades. I wrote a book about my experiences. I became a venture capitalist, then a senator, then vice president." He raised the other hand. "Your story: you came to America as a refugee. That part I don't dispute. But then you possibly married your brother to commit immigration fraud. You definitely committed tax fraud by filing joint returns with a man you weren't legally married to. You funneled $2.9 million in campaign funds to your boyfriend. You spread anti-Semitic tropes so often your own party condemned you. You minimized 9/11. and you swore loyalty to Somalia while serving in American Congress. He brought his hands together. You accused me of having a fake story, but every word of my book has been fact-checked by journalists for nearly a decade. I've done hundreds of interviews about my background. Every claim I've made is verified. Your story, it falls apart under the slightest scrutiny. Marriage fraud, tax fraud, campaign fraud, perjury, bigotry, divided loyalty, all documented, all in the public record. Vance walked closer to the witness table. You accused me of exploiting my family, but I wrote honestly about our struggles because I thought it might help other families. I didn't hide anything. I didn't commit crimes. I told the truth. You may have used your own brother in a fraudulent marriage scheme. You've hidden your immigration records for years. You've refused to answer basic questions about your family relationships. You've taken the fifth on your tax returns. That's not honesty. That's obstruction. He stood directly in front of her now. You mocked my marriage. You said I married up into privilege, but I have one wife. We've been married for years. We're raising a family together. Our relationship is exactly what it appears to be. You've had multiple marriages with overlapping timelines. You've possibly committed bigamy. You had an affair with a married man while his company was receiving millions from your campaign. And when you married him, his mysterious company suddenly became worth millions with no explanation. Vance's voice hardened. You called me a sellout. You said I betrayed my class by becoming successful. But success isn't betrayal. Moving up isn't selling out. The American dream is about improving your circumstances through hard work. And that's exactly what I did. You're the one who sold out, Representative. You sold out your donors by funneling their money to your boyfriend. You sold out your constituents by prioritizing Somalia over America. You sold out your oath by promising a foreign country you'd serve them from inside our government. He leaned in close. You called me a shapeshifter because I changed my views on President Trump. And yes, I did change my views. I said so publicly. I explained why. I didn't hide it or pretend it didn't happen. That's what honest people do when they reconsider their positions. But changing your mind about a politician isn't the same as swearing an oath you never intended to keep. It's not the same as taking citizenship in one country while promising loyalty to another. It's not the same as saying one thing to Americans and another thing entirely to Somalis. Vance straightened. You came here to expose me as a fraud, but everything you accused me of, you're guilty of yourself. Every attack you made on me is a confession about you. He walked back toward the dais. Fake story. Yours is built on fraud, exploited family. You may have married your brother for a green card, married for money. You funneled millions to your boyfriend, betrayed your origins. You swore loyalty to a foreign country. No principles. You've apologized for bigotry 3 times and kept doing it. Shapeshifter. You took an oath you never intended to keep. He turned to face her one final time. The American dream isn't about where you start, Representative. It's about how you get where you're going. I worked. You cheated. I was honest. You lied. I serve America. You serve yourself in Somalia. His voice was cold, final. You came here to destroy me, but all you did was destroy yourself. He returned to the presiding chair and sat down. I could continue, Representative. I have more documentation, more evidence, more questions you can't answer, but I think the point is made. He straightened his papers. Some people did something today, Representative Omar. They came to this chamber to humiliate a man who actually lived the American dream. They made accusations they couldn't support. They attacked a story they couldn't disprove. And they exposed themselves as everything they accused their target of being. He looked directly at her. You called me a fraud, but the only fraud in this room is you, and now everyone knows it. He glanced at the chairman. I yield my time. The chamber sat in stunned silence. For a long moment, no one moved. The cameras kept rolling. The senators sat frozen. The gallery held its collective breath. Then the dam broke. The Republican side erupted in applause. Senators who had sat silently through Omar's attack were now on their feet. The gallery, divided in its sympathies, became chaos. Some people cheering, others shouting in protest, a few simply sitting in shock. Chairman Grassley hammered his gavel repeatedly. Order! This chamber will come to order. At the witness table, Ilhan Omar sat motionless. Her carefully prepared attack, the viral moment she'd been planning for weeks, had been turned completely against her. Every accusation she'd made had become a weapon used against herself. Her staff surrounded her, whispering urgently, but she didn't seem to hear them. Her eyes were fixed on some middle distance, processing what had just happened. She had walked into this chamber expecting to destroy the vice president's reputation. Instead, she had provided him with the perfect platform to destroy hers. Senator Warren leaned over to Senator Booker. Her expression was troubled. Neither of them said anything. There was nothing to say. Every Democratic senator in the room understood what had just happened. Omar had opened a door that should have stayed closed, and Vance had walked through it with a flamethrower. The media gallery was in chaos. Reporters who'd been preparing "Omar destroys Vance" stories were scrambling to rewrite their entire narratives. Camera operators zoomed in on Omar's face, capturing her shell-shocked expression. Chairman Grassley finally restored enough order to speak. "This hearing is in recess. This hearing is in recess." Omar stood slowly, mechanically. Her staff formed a protective circle around her as she moved toward the exit. Reporters shouted questions from every direction. "Representative Omar, do you have a response?" "Representative Omar, is Ahmed Elmi your brother?" "Representative Omar, where did Rose Lake Capital's money come from?" "Representative Omar, did you commit immigration fraud?" She said nothing. She kept walking, head down, eyes fixed on the floor. The confident woman who'd strutted into the chamber 3 hours ago was gone. In her place was someone who just watched her entire public narrative collapse in real time. As she passed the dais, Vance was calmly organizing his folders, speaking quietly with an aide about something mundane. He glanced up as Omar passed. Their eyes met for just a moment. Vance nodded once, a small, almost sympathetic gesture. Omar looked away and kept walking. She didn't stop until she was in her car, surrounded by tinted windows, away from the cameras. Only then did she allow herself to understand what had happened. She'd been trapped. From the very beginning, she'd been trapped. Her entire attack, every word, every accusation, every carefully prepared line had been anticipated. Vance had let her talk because every attack she made gave him ammunition. He'd let her build her entire case because he knew exactly how he would tear it down. She'd walked into an ambush thinking she was the ambusher, and now her political career was in ruins. The video went viral within hours. 80 million views in the first 48 hours. Clips spread across every platform: YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, TikTok, Instagram. Vance Destroys Omar became the top trending topic in the United States, then globally. The mainstream media scrambled to cover it. Some outlets tried to frame it as a Republican attack, but the framing couldn't hold. Omar had started it. She'd attacked Vance unprovoked for 22 minutes. He'd simply responded with documented facts. The political fallout was swift and severe. Within a week, the Department of Justice announced it was opening an investigation into potential immigration fraud, tax fraud, and perjury. The House Ethics Committee launched its own inquiry into campaign finance violations and possible foreign influence. Within 2 weeks, Democratic leadership quietly removed Omar from the House Foreign Affairs Committee, citing ongoing concerns about foreign entanglements. The move was framed as procedural, but everyone understood what it meant. She'd become too toxic to defend. Within a month, a primary challenger emerged. His name was Hassan Ahmed, a Somali-American Army veteran who'd served 2 tours in Afghanistan. His announcement video featured him in uniform, hand over heart, reciting the Pledge of Allegiance. "I am American first," he said. "I swore an oath to this country and I meant every word." My opponent swore the same oath, then promised Somalia she would serve them from inside our government. That's not representation. That's betrayal. And it ends now. The video hit 30 million views in a week. Omar's poll numbers collapsed. Her favorability rating in her own district dropped 23 points. Donors who'd supported her for years quietly redirected their money elsewhere. Squad members who'd always defended her issued only tepid statements of support, carefully worded, carefully hedged, carefully distant. She was alone. 6 months later, Hassan Ahmed defeated Ilhan Omar in the Democratic primary by 16 points. It was the largest primary defeat of any squad member in history. On election night, Ahmed gave his victory speech at a community center in Minneapolis. The crowd was diverse. Somali Americans, Black Americans, White Americans, Hispanic Americans, united in their rejection of what Omar had represented. "Tonight is not about defeating one person," Ahmed said. "It's about reclaiming what it means to be an American. It's about showing the world that you can come to this country as an immigrant, embrace its values, serve in its military, and love it with your whole heart, without any divided loyalties, without any hidden agendas, without any betrayal of the oath you swore." The crowd chanted, "USA, USA, USA." Ilhan Omar forgot what that oath meant. Or maybe she never understood that being American isn't about what you can take from this country. It's about what you give to it. It's about service. It's about loyalty. It's about honoring the opportunity you've been given. He paused. "I haven't forgotten, and I never will." Omar released a statement the following day. She was leaving politics to spend time with her family and pursue opportunities in the private sector. She thanked her supporters. She expressed pride in her service. She never addressed the specific allegations from the hearing. She never explained the marriage timeline. She never released the immigration records. She never accounted for Rose Lake Capital's mysterious millions. She just disappeared from public life. The investigations that followed were extensive and damaging. The Department of Justice's immigration fraud investigation subpoenaed records from North Dakota State University, UK immigration authorities, and Minnesota Vital Records. Former classmates and community members were interviewed. The full scope was never publicly disclosed, but leaks suggested investigators had found significant inconsistencies in Omar's immigration timeline. The tax fraud investigation was more straightforward. The joint returns filed with Ahmed Hiasi while legally married to Ahmed Elmi were clear violations of federal tax law. Omar's lawyers negotiated quietly with the IRS. Settlement terms were sealed, but sources suggested it involved significant back taxes, penalties, and interest. The campaign finance investigation proved most damaging to her public reputation. The FEC found multiple violations in the payments to the E Street Group. Internal documents obtained during the investigation revealed a pattern of billing for services never rendered, payments for personal expenses disguised as campaign costs, and financial arrangements that clearly violated federal election law. Omar was fined $250,000, one of the largest campaign finance penalties ever assessed against a sitting member of Congress. She was required to repay an additional $400,000 to her campaign fund. Several former staffers cooperated with investigators in exchange for immunity. The Rose Lake Capital investigation was the most mysterious. Forensic accountants traced wire transfers through a labyrinth of shell companies across multiple jurisdictions. The money trail led to Dubai, to Mogadishu, to Doha, to accounts that proved difficult to penetrate. What investigators found, or claimed to find, was never fully disclosed, but the investigation resulted in Rose Lake Capital being placed on a Treasury Department watch list. Tim Minett was barred from engaging in certain financial transactions. The firm quietly dissolved, its assets frozen pending further investigation. The House Ethics Committee issued a formal reprimand, citing conduct that does not reflect credibly on the House of Representatives. The reprimand stopped short of censure, but the message was clear. Omar had violated the standards expected of a member of Congress. And then there was the intelligence investigation, the one that never became public. Sources within the intelligence community suggested that Omar's activities on the House Foreign Affairs Committee had attracted serious concern. Her communications with Somali government officials, her advocacy for policies that benefited Somalia at America's expense, her access to classified information about diplomatic strategies in the Horn of Africa. The investigation was conducted by the FBI's Counterintelligence Division. Its findings were classified, But Omar's sudden removal from the Foreign Affairs Committee, officially attributed to committee restructuring, coincided precisely with the investigation's conclusion. She was never charged with espionage. She was never publicly accused of sharing classified information. But the questions lingered, the suspicions remained, and her security clearance was quietly revoked, ending any possibility of future committee assignments involving sensitive information. The broader political implications of the hearing extended far beyond Ilhan Omar. For the Democratic Party, it was a moment of reckoning. The Squad, the group of progressive congresswomen who'd risen to prominence in 2018, had long been both an asset and a liability. Their energy and activism energized the base, but their controversies created constant headaches for party leadership. Omar's destruction changed the calculus. Suddenly, the costs of defending controversial members outweighed the benefits. Party leaders became more willing to distance themselves from provocative statements. The Squad's influence, once seemingly ascendant, began to wane. For the Republican Party, the hearing was a vindication. J.D. Vance, once dismissed by some as a never-Trumper who'd opportunistically converted, had proven himself in the most dramatic way possible. He'd faced an attack designed to destroy him and turned it into a devastating counterattack. His standing within the party soared. Donors who'd been skeptical opened their checkbooks. Activists who'd questioned his loyalty embraced him. The hillbilly vice president had shown he could fight. For the Somali-American community, the hearing forced a difficult conversation. Many community members were embarrassed by Omar's statements in the Minneapolis video. They'd come to America seeking refuge and opportunity. They'd embraced their new country while maintaining pride in their heritage. And they resented being represented by someone who seemed to see America as merely a tool to be used for Somalia's benefit. Hassan Ahmed's campaign tapped into this sentiment. His message, that you could be proudly Somali-American while being unquestionably loyal to America, resonated deeply. His victory was celebrated not as a defeat for Somali representation, but as a new beginning. Ilhan Omar doesn't speak for us, one community leader told a reporter after the election. She never did. She spoke for herself. We are Americans, this is our home, and we're glad to finally have a representative who understands that. 1 year after the hearing, a reporter from The Atlantic tracked down Vice President Vance for a retrospective interview. Do you have any regrets about how you handled Representative Omar's attack? Vance considered the question carefully. Regrets? No. She came into that chamber with a prepared attack on my family, my background, my character. She called my mother's struggle with addiction something I exploited. She mocked my marriage. She questioned my integrity. He shook his head. I didn't start that fight. She did. I just finished it. Some have said you were too harsh, that you destroyed her career. I responded to her accusations with documented facts. Everything I said was based on public records, verified documents, her own words. If the facts destroyed her career, that's not my fault. That's the consequence of building your career on a foundation of fraud. The reporter asked about the broader implications. What do you think this episode says about American politics? Vance thought for a moment. I think it says that the truth still matters, that you can't build a political career on lies and expect to never face consequences, that eventually someone is going to ask questions you can't answer. He leaned back. Ilhan Omar built her entire public image on her refugee story, the American dream made real, and that could have been a beautiful thing. There are millions of immigrants who came to this country with nothing and built wonderful lives through hard work and honesty. Their stories are worth celebrating. He paused. But Omar's story was corrupted by fraud, by self-dealing, by divided loyalties, by bigotry. She took something that could have been inspiring and turned it into a cautionary tale. Another pause. She accused me of having a fake story, but my story is real. Every word of it, the poverty, the addiction, the struggle, the grandmother who saved me, all of it. I wrote it in a book that's been scrutinized for nearly a decade. I've answered every question anyone has ever asked about my background. She couldn't say the same. And when she attacked my authenticity, she opened the door for me to examine hers. She didn't like what I found. The reporter asked one final question. What do you hope people take away from what happened? Vance smiled slightly. I hope they understand that the American dream is real, that you can come from nothing and achieve anything in this country. But the dream only works if you pursue it honestly. If you take shortcuts, if you commit fraud, if you betray your oaths, if you put yourself above the country that gave you everything, eventually you'll be exposed. He stood, signaling the interview was over. Ilhan Omar tried to destroy me by attacking my story, but my story is true, hers wasn't, and that made all the difference. He smiled. Some people did something. They tried to tear down someone who actually lived the American dream, and they exposed themselves as everything they accused their target of being. He paused at the door. The truth has a way of sorting things out. All you have to do is shine a light on it. In Minneapolis, the Somali-American community began a process of renewal. Hassan Ahmed, the new congressman, made good on his campaign promises. He established programs to help Somali immigrants integrate more fully into American society while maintaining pride in their heritage. He visited schools, community centers, mosques, delivering a consistent message. You can be proudly Somali and fully American. The two identities don't conflict. They complement each other. My parents came here as refugees, he told a gathering of young Somali Americans a year after his election. They were grateful every day for the opportunity America gave them. They learned English. They started businesses. They became citizens. And they raised their children to love this country as much as they loved Somalia. He paused, looking out at the young faces. Ilhan Omar told you that America was just a place to work, that Somalia was your real home. She was wrong. America is your home. This is where you'll build your lives, raise your families, pursue your dreams. And you can do all of that while honoring your heritage and staying connected to your roots. He held up his hand, showing the scar from a wound he'd received in Afghanistan. But you have to choose. Not between being Somali and being American. You can be both. Between serving this country honestly and using it for something else, between gratitude and exploitation, between loyalty and betrayal. He continued, I chose to serve. I chose to put on a uniform and defend this country with my life, and I'm asking you to serve too, not necessarily in the military, but in your communities, in your careers, in your daily lives. Be the kind of Americans that make other Americans proud to have you as neighbors. The applause was thunderous. The lessons of the hearing echoed through American politics for years. For aspiring politicians, it became a cautionary tale about the dangers of attacking an opponent without first examining your own vulnerabilities. Don't pull an Omar became shorthand in political circles for launching an attack that backfires spectacularly. For political consultants, it became a case study in preparation and patience. Vance's strategy, letting the attack unfold completely before responding, was analyzed in campaign seminars and graduate school courses. The consensus was clear. Sometimes the best defense is letting your opponent defeat themselves. For the media, it was a reminder that manufactured narratives can collapse quickly when confronted with documented facts. The reporters who'd been preparing, Omar destroys Vance, stories had to completely reverse course within hours. Several wrote reflective pieces about the importance of skepticism, even toward sources they agreed with politically. And for ordinary Americans, it was a demonstration that accountability was still possible, that powerful people could still face consequences, that the truth, patiently assembled and fearlessly presented, could still prevail. In the years that followed, the hearing became a case study in political accountability. How one person's attack could backfire catastrophically when met with documented facts. How preparation and patience could defeat aggression and arrogance. J.D. Vance continued as vice president, his reputation enhanced rather than diminished by the confrontation. The hillbilly who wouldn't back down became part of his political brand. His book sales surged. His approval ratings climbed. Ilhan Omar faded from public life. Occasionally, reporters would seek her out for comment on various controversies. She rarely responded. When she did, her answers were carefully scripted, carefully limited, carefully designed to avoid any substantive discussion of what had happened. The investigations continued for years. Some resulted in findings, others stalled. The full truth about Ahmed Elmi, about Rose Lake Capital, about the Somalia connections, much of it remained murky, hidden behind sealed records and unanswered questions. But the hearing itself remained, preserved in video, documented in transcripts, available for anyone to watch. And the lesson it taught was simple. Don't attack someone else's story, unless you're certain your own can withstand scrutiny. Don't throw stones if you live in a glass house. Don't start a fight you're not prepared to finish. Some people did something. They learned that lesson the hard way, and the truth, patient, documented, undeniable, was there waiting for them all along. 5 years after the hearing, a documentary filmmaker released a comprehensive account of what had happened. Titled The Trap, it featured interviews with participants from both sides, analysis from political scientists, and previously unseen footage from the day itself. The documentary revealed details that hadn't been public before. It showed Vance's preparation room the morning of the hearing, folders arranged meticulously, staff reviewing final details, the vice president calm and focused while everyone around him was nervous. It showed Omar's preparation room, the confidence, the rehearsals, the certainty that she was about to deliver a career-defining moment. It showed the reactions of senators on both sides as the hearing unfolded, the growing discomfort on the Democratic side, the barely suppressed satisfaction on the Republican side, and it showed the aftermath, Omar's silent departure, Vance's composed cleanup, the explosion of activity in the media gallery. The filmmaker interviewed Omar's former staff members, some of whom spoke anonymously about what had happened behind the scenes. We knew there were vulnerabilities, one said. The marriage stuff, the campaign finance stuff, we knew it was there. But she was convinced that no one would dare bring it up. She thought the racism accusations would protect her. She thought she was untouchable. Another added, we tried to warn her. We said, what if he hits back? What if he has documentation? And she said, he won't. He's too scared. They're all too scared. She was wrong. The documentary also interviewed former Vance staffers who described the months of preparation. He was methodical about it, one said. Every claim she might make, he had a response prepared. Every attack she might launch, he had a counterattack ready. And everything was documented. He wasn't going to make accusations he couldn't prove. He was going to let the records speak for themselves. The filmmaker asked Vance himself why he'd chosen to respond so devastatingly, rather than taking the high road. She attacked my mother, Vance said simply. She mocked my family's struggles. She called my entire life story a fraud, and she did it thinking there would be no consequences because she'd wrapped herself in identity politics. He paused. I could have ignored it. I could have given a dignified non-response and let the media spin it however they wanted. But I thought about my grandmother, who raised me when no one else would. I thought about my mother, who struggled with addiction but who I loved despite everything. I thought about the people I grew up with, who are still struggling, who looked at my story as proof that there was a way out. He continued, and I decided that I wasn't going to let someone who had cheated and lied her way through life tell me that my honest story was fake. I wasn't going to let her attack my family while her own family history was a web of fraud and deception. He shrugged. So I fought back with facts, with documents, with the truth, and the truth was devastating because it was true. The documentary ended with a montage of the hearing's most powerful moments, set against interviews with ordinary Americans who'd watched it unfold. It showed me that you can still fight back, said one viewer, a woman from Ohio. That the powerful aren't invincible, that if you have the truth on your side and you're willing to use it, you can win. It reminded me why I came to America, said another, a Somali-American man from Minneapolis. Not to use this country, but to be part of it, to contribute, to belong. Omar forgot that. I never will. The final image was of Vance returning to his office after the hearing, closing the door, sitting alone at his desk. He looked tired but satisfied. He picked up a photo on his desk, his grandmother, the woman who'd saved him. He looked at it for a long moment. Then he set it down, opened a folder, and got back to work. The story of that day lived on. In political science courses, in campaign strategy seminars, in late-night conversations about truth and accountability, in the collective memory of a nation that watched, in real time, as someone who came to destroy was destroyed instead. And the lesson endured, simple and stark. The truth matters, the facts matter, and eventually, inevitably, they will come to light. Some people did something. They attacked an honest man's honest story, and they discovered too late that their own story couldn't survive the scrutiny they'd invited. The hillbilly from Ohio had won. Not with lies, not with deflection, not with political tricks. With the truth. And that made all the difference.